Before we go on from Pennsylvania, I want to let's take a step back. The registration numbers that I keep seeing show that the Republicans have really closed the gap, right? By hundreds of
Oh
thousands of
yeah, I mean
voters.
it was millions back in 16, and it's just a what 300
Yeah.
300,000 and change now is
So
the
from a
gap.
pollster perspective, okay, you got new people registering to vote, the gap closing, seemingly not a lot of people moving in or out of Pennsylvania, meaning the electorate seems to number wise stay pretty consistent. It's just that people are shifting. How do you guys take that into account, and what does that say to you?
Well, I mean, we take it into account in how you build your models for party turnout. You have to consider now, give the Republicans a little more oomph than you would have given them in 2020 because they represent a smaller portion of the vote. But at the same time, you don't want to overemphasize it, especially if you're considered a Republican. Somehow they think that you have your thumb on the scale, other liberal news outlets, colleges they never question. So we'd rather err on the side of underestimating the Republican turnout than overestimating it. But the fact is, you have to build in a higher than normal turnout and an excitement because there's something about the first time that you are a voter or the first time that you've just changed parties. There's a lot of excitement to that vote, so you have greater likely to turn out, a higher voter efficacy.
So if I mean, and again, I get the where we are 30 something, well, just under 30 days out, but like the Trump team has to feel really good about Pennsylvania. That Butler rally, to me, I get rallies don't vote, yard signs don't vote. But to your point about the enthusiasm, there's a lot of excitement in the air, a lot of momentum for Trump, both in terms of the registration, the feeling, all that stuff. That's got to bode well for him.
Right. Rallies don't vote and yard signs don't vote, but they are symptoms of support. And they have a way of spreading it because a rally is somebody that might have gone and talked to you about it. You might ask them some questions. A yard sign is somebody's yard that that you may say, oh, well, the Joneses are for Trump. Maybe we should consider. So it speaks to people. And so I think that there's more and more of that. The other thing is Kamala Harris has this problem. When you talk about an incumbent and then you say versus generic, like an
Right.
incumbent Democrat versus generic Republican or vice versa, generic always beats them because nobody knows anything negative about generic. Well, she kind of started off generic. And so she had all the benefits of nobody really, really disliking her with reason. Most of it was just she seemed silly and people don't like her. But that wasn't the majority of folks. Now, the more that is learned, she has nowhere to go but down. Whereas all of Trump's foibles are known about. There's nothing new you're going to find out about Trump in the next 30 days. It's like, oh, well, we didn't know that. I mean, it's
Right.
just not going to happen.
I agree with you. It's sort of like tell me something I don't know about Donald Trump and how that might affect anything. Whereas I think people, I keep saying, and I've stolen this phrase, Kamala curious. But every time that you see a new interview with her or hear something, I think it makes him less Kamala curious and more saying, you know what, we know Trump. I may not like everything about the guy, but I know him. I know his record. I know the results, and I don't trust her.
Right. And that's the other thing. And this is what we're picking up is people saying, yeah, I like what she says. But it's almost like kind of Bernie Sanders spilled the beans on Meet the Press. He's saying she's a progressive. She's saying what she's got to say to get elected. Well, people are beginning to realize that. I mean, that's what we keep coming back with is people saying, well, I don't believe that she will do the things she says. I believe she'll do the things she believes in.
All
Biden
right,
said
so
one thing and did another, and so will she.
what do you think is the most effective? And I want to move on from Pennsylvania, but you've touched on something important. If you think about the attacks on Kamala Harris, that's one of them. She's not authentic. Two, you mentioned the Bernie Sanders thing. She's progressive, right? She's a dangerously liberal person. And then we don't know where she stands. But what do you think is the most effective attack against her down the stretch?
Well, I guess it does kind of depend on the state, but I think in Pennsylvania, it's that inauthenticity. This idea that she might act like she can relate to this blue collar lifestyle and values, but she's an outsider to it. She doesn't really understand it. And where they believe that Joe could relate to it, they'll
Yeah.
never believe she can.
Last night on 60 Minutes, when Bill Whitaker asked her if she owned a gun, and I give him a ton of credit. I said at the beginning. I mean, he literally followed up. Okay, what kind? When was the last time you shot it? And I felt like, wow, it's okay. She answered the question. She said, I have a Glock and I've gone to the range. Now, I got to be honest with you. I don't mean I'm not trying to call her a liar, but she did not come across as authentic, right? It was not like, I was laughing to myself and I'm like, okay, you might technically own a Glock, but I guarantee you that woman has not been to a range anytime in the past, in the recent past.
And did she give us a number for that Glock? No. She doesn't know the number. She has no idea what the number is.
Right. I mean,
If
I
she
did
has
get
it
it.
at all, she probably just recognizes the name brand.
Right. It was sort of like Smith and Wesson. Like
Yeah,
it was. All
yeah.
right. So that car. So, but the bottom line before we leave Pennsylvania is you feel that Pennsylvania is moving in the right direction and that the Trump team should be what? What's the adjective if you had to say to them? Should they be cautiously optimistic? Should they be excited? What would you say about Pennsylvania?
I think they should be cautiously optimistic.
Okay. Can we move? I want to just kind of clear out the other states for a second because you guys have a new poll in Arizona. It shows Trump up 47-1 to Harris 45.5. So I feel, and that's fairly consistent with the Real Clear Politics average, right? So you guys have Trump up about 1.6%. They've got him up 1.4. He's up for the last 5 public polls. I've said before, of all of the 7 battleground states, this is the one I feel most confident in. Do you share that?
I will tell you, yeah, short of the storm may affect North Carolina a little bit. I would have told you North Carolina was the other one. But yes,
Oh,
I
all
definitely.
right. We're gonna get to that. I want to hear that because I didn't. I'll tell you in a second, but I wouldn't have. All right. But Arizona, where I mean, I feel like this is Trump country. It just naturally needs to come home.
Yeah, I think Arizona is going to be a good, solid election just because they know this border stuff. I mean, they've lived it. They've also lived a lot of nonsense with their leaders telling them one thing and doing another. And I think that there's the other thing that's going on. It's what's called the hidden Trump vote, and we think it is higher in some places than in others. Arizona's a place that is a little higher, and I think that could be a solid victory and might very well even uh, get Kerry Lake there as well in the Senate race.
Okay, well, you brought up that. So you guys have the Senate race at 47.2 to Gallego to 42% for Lake. What gives you hope if you're Kerry Lake's team?
I think that's Matt Towery's poll because the one we did, I think, had it a 4 point race.
Okay.
But anyway, just because I think there might be that big of a Trump surge there.
Okay.
And the other thing is, if you'll notice, you know how we talk about hidden vote, Kerry Lake is the kind of person that people might not want to say they're for. And look at the
Interesting.
high undecideds in that race compared to the race for president. I think
All
there's a
right.
lot of people for Kerry Lake who are saying undecided right now.
I think that might be true, and I think the reality is I can't see how you can live in Arizona and see the immigration issue sat close and not say we need somebody that's going to focus on this as a major issue and a priority. In Georgia, you guys had the race at 46.2 to Trump to 44.5 for Harris. Uh, where do you put that as far as like I said, I think Arizona is solid. Where do you put Georgia?
I think Georgia is difficult, and part of it is some of the things we use to kind of measure the hidden vote. It's one of the states with the least hidden vote. So I think what we're seeing is very close to what we get, what's going to happen. It, the having Kemp campaign with him was very beneficial, but again, this is storm affected. I mean, those Augusta might not be very Republican, but the neighborhoods around Augusta are extremely Republican. Evans County and stuff like that, and then you get into northern the mountainous Georgia, and they were very affected. And so it really is. There's a lot of when your whole life's washed out there's a lot of things that kind of might fall by the wayside. Voting could be one of them, and just the difficulty of voting, of getting to a precinct location, some of which might not be there anymore. Now, it quite might also be that the anger at the federal government might be a motivator to vote. But I think that if I were the governor of Georgia, I would start right now coming up with a plan to make sure these people can vote.
I got to imagine that that's the case, and that kind of bleeds into North Carolina. And you brought it up, right? So you guys had this 48.4 to 46 for Trump, but play to where things are and how the storm affects that.
Well, first of all, in North Carolina, there are a lot of people who are like, "Oh, the governor's race is going to just change everything." Oh, and there's been a lot of changing demographics, and I hear all this nonsense. But what I will tell you is, look at North Carolina's pattern. 16, they elected Republican Trump and a Democrat governor. 20, they did the same thing and reelected a Republican senator. And 22, this horrible year for the Republicans, quote unquote, and they elected a Republican senator and increased their majorities in both legislative chambers. So I think North Carolina is a place full of ticket splitters, and they, in most cases, unless there's a Democrat star, they tend to vote Republican. And so I really just don't buy that this the Republican governor is going to drag them down. Now, what I do believe is some of those areas. I mean, first of all, any of us who spend any time in Western North Carolina know Asheville. It might as well be Austin. I mean, Asheville is not a conservative place, but
It's very
around,
democratic.
oh my gosh, yes, it's the counterculture. Let me assure you, they could move right into Seattle and fit in. But absolutely. But the thing is, around Asheville, you think about the fact that a lot of this is Mark Meadows' district. This is
Yeah.
a conservative place, and a lot of these communities have just been devastated. And so it really is a concern. I know that there's a lot of attention right now on making sure that these people are getting what they need, and just the whole, kerfuffle with the feds can't get helicopters in the air and this. I mean, apparently the skies all over Western North Carolina were full of private sector choppers and people doing things with it on their own dime just to save people's lives, and the federal government was very missing in action. And I think that may work against them, but it's still that mechanism of how do they vote? Is the mail reliable? Is their precinct going to be open? I mean, how do the mechanics of voting?
Well, and I talked to a buddy of mine who lives in Western North Carolina. He said the town that his son was in is, he said, literally gone. And I do wonder, to your previous point about being able to actually cast a ballot. Like, they're trying to get the essential services to people, to clear a road, to get them water and food, to get the electricity back on. And then to your right, somebody has to say, oh, by the way, yeah, we need to go vote. And there needs to be a mechanism to actually go, like an institution, a registrar of voters. I don't know that that exists. And when you look at these states, I mean, I just don't. To me, this is a huge. There was a stat that I saw that said 61% of the affected counties was a Trump vote. That, in a state like North Carolina, I got to imagine that could affect the outcome.
Absolutely. I mean, it was a state that like I said, I felt as good about it as any other state for Trump, and I just don't feel that way right now until I understand what the mechanism for them to vote. Now, they're going to be angry. There's no question about it. They're going to be angry, and these are Trump voters, so the ones that have passed on don't get to vote, and God bless them. But in some states maybe they would, but North Carolina's kind of famous for pretty good elections, to be honest. So I think that it is a real concern of what that mechanism is.
So when we see public polls come out of North Carolina in these final couple weeks, should we look at them with a degree of skepticism? Because you mentioned the models. How do you put a model together if you look at people in Western North Carolina and say, I don't know, that 4 out of 4 voter may very well really want to vote in normal times, but now for a variety of logistical reasons may not be able to. So how do we account for them? Should we look at the polls more skeptically in the last few weeks?
I think probably you should because until, I mean, I'm paying very close attention to it. I have a place in the mountains up there myself, and so I spend a good bit of time up there, and I'm asking a lot of questions about how people, what the mechanism is to vote, and I'd like to be a lot more confident about that.
What answers are you getting? Is it, hey, we're not there
They haven't
yet,
heard
we
anything
will?
about voting yet. Yeah, hadn't heard anything. It's like, yeah, voting. That sounds great. Let's put that on the to-do list.
Yeah, that's for next week, right? I mean, that's
You're right.
priority is I need to get your house back. I need to get you electricity. I need to clear this road. I need to get you water. We got plenty of time to vote, right?
Right. I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. We'll talk about voting later.
Yeah, and I have a feeling at some point though that's going to become a concern, right? I think if we get to 10 days out, to your point, like people are literally saying when they wake up, I have to figure out here are the 5 priorities. I just don't know that voting is going to be on them. Um, that's going to, I mean, to me, this is crucial, right? Because if you look at the way that you get to 270, I have North Carolina solidly in the Trump camp, and your point, this would shake things up in a way that I wasn't expecting.
And add to that, look at where that hurricane is headed in Florida. I'm telling
So
you,
let's
it hit the bend first, and now it's headed to Tampa, St. Pete, all the way through Orlando. I'm just, I mean, you take that plus a recreational marijuana on the ballot, plus a abortion on the ballot. I mean, I just think and a lukewarm Rick Scott campaign. I think this is a recipe for possible problems there.
I have to say, when I saw the mayor of Tampa last night come out and say, if you stay here, you will die. First of all, I've never seen a warning like that in my lifetime. I mean, and I've hurricanes, stuff that I've been affected by, stuff that I've seen other, on the news. That to me was a warning that I've never ever heard when they talk about the catastrophic nature of this storm. That being said, to your point, when it hits that whole swath of Florida, um, I got to imagine. I mean, to your point, you're going to go through the same process that North Carolina did, which is we're going to want to rebuild roads, get electricity on, get you fed, and get you some water. And I do wonder how that ultimately could affect Florida.
Well, and the thing is, what we have learned though is DeSantis and his team, they built bridges in weeks. I mean, they're pretty good, and they have every
Yeah,
reason in the world to want to make sure those people vote. And you got to wonder whether Roy Cooper has the same motivation in North Carolina.
interesting. All right,
He might make sure Asheville votes. He'll be in Asheville. I can promise you that.
yeah. The state that has given me the most pause is because of the warning that you issued the last time you were here. So I kept seeing good trends in Nevada. And then you said to me, Sean, just pump the brakes a little. The sort of the union machine in Clark County specifically always gives you then you come out with this poll. Harris 45.3, Trump 43.5. But the thing that I found so fascinating in this poll was the third party at 7.8%. What's going on there?
Well, a lot of it could be hidden vote. There are a lot of people who are expressing certain opinions that just when that union machine and it starts on that Friday and the Saturday before the election, and they go through all those casinos and make sure everybody's voted, and they've got a list of who got absentee ballots, and they're knocking on your door Saturday and Monday to collect your ballot, and it is a machine that is like nothing you've ever seen, and I think that most, I would say that probably is going to filter down to less than a third of them will actually end up voting third party. It's just one of those things that is there early, but I do think that is significant, and that's one of the. I know a lot of people say it's better than it's just head to head with Trump and Harris, but the fact is, in so many of these places, one of the differences between 2020 and 2016 was there were other major choices, whether it was the Libertarian or the Green Party candidate in 2016, and people who didn't like either candidate had a place to go. There's a reason Kamala Harris has been fighting, and the Democrats have been
Yeah, he
fighting
sued.
anybody else been on the ballot because they know that people who like neither candidate ended up voting Democrat last time. They don't need them to have anywhere else to go. So there may be some hope for Nevada, but you ain't going to hear it from me because
Well, it's
I've
funny
learned my
because
lesson
when
there.
you look at that Senate race, Jackie Rosen 48.2, Sam Brown 48.4, third party there high too, 7.2%. I again, I think your warning was well placed. This seems like there, as much as Trump was surging there, and I felt very good about the no tax on tips, the no tax on overtime, but the machine is definitely responding.
Well, and that's why she came out for no tax on tips. And the thing
Right.
is, saying it in a rally and having you're depending on the mainstream media to say it. I mean, I think I said this on another show, but whoever says it on TV firstest and loudest is who owns the no tax on tips. It ain't gonna matter who thought of it first because the media ain't gonna do that job. The media is not gonna come in and go, no, 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 no. Trump said this first. They're not gonna do that. So it does matter of who hits with the message hardest.
Yeah. All right. There's 2 states left in our 7 battleground states, part of the blue wall. We've already addressed Pennsylvania. We've got Michigan and Wisconsin. You tell me which one you want to go with first.
Michigan, I think Michigan has got some little real possibilities. You still have some very upset who are in the Arab American, Muslim American community, Lebanese American. I mean, there's so many different groups in that area, kind of outside of Detroit, and they were very dissatisfied with Biden. They were not even willing to commit to voting for him at the convention, and so that they are not people that the Democrats can necessarily count on. And looking at the foreign policy that continues, I mean, this is a very difficult thing for Kamala Harris. I mean, if you're going to have sympathy for her, have sympathy for her on this because this is a tightrope. I mean, she can't upset either side. If she goes too far in for them, she's going to upset a lot of Democrat Jewish voters who usually vote Democrat. And if she goes too far just to get Michigan, she could upset them. And then if she doesn't, she could lose those votes in Michigan. So I think that wild card plus the wild card of the actual auto workers realizing that Trump is right on this electric car stuff.
Yep.
I think Michigan could provide a surprise. And the fact that Michigan has already voted on abortion, and a lot of people in Michigan consider abortion settled.
Michigan, to me, I've been saying this now for about a week, is my sleeper race, and not just the presidential, but I think Mike Rogers beats Alyssa Slotkin in that Senate race, and it's tied right now, 47-47 with you guys. I just think, to me, the thing about it is the momentum I feel is with Trump for all the aforementioned reasons that you laid out, right? The auto workers, young black men, the Arab community. It's like everything is breaking pro-Trump. Every one of these polls, it's a slow burn, but it's in the right direction.
And even groups out of Michigan that are not known for their right-leaning polls are saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Which
Well, she
brings me to
sent Alyssa Slotkin sent out a warning on a donor call and said, "I just want
about
everyone
that.
to know." And that wasn't meant to be public. This is a private phone call that somebody leaked out where she's telling her donors, "Hey, my private polling has Kamala Harris losing."
And the thing is, that's the other thing worth mentioning. Think about this. Since the vice president's debate, how few polls are out there? There are so few state polls, and almost more than 7 days now, there haven't been any. And I think there's a reason. I think that a lot of these groups that like to put their thumb on the scale can't even put their thumb on the scale enough right now. I mean, it makes no sense that last Sunday we didn't have 3 or 4 different groups of polls dropping.
It's sort of like, oh, hey, because it's also interesting how many polls come out that they've sat on, right? So I saw the AARP, the Washington or NBC, like they'll do these polls and they sit on for a while, and you got to wonder how many of them did polls, but they're sitting on them because they don't want us to see for exactly your reason, right? How many of them?
Yeah, they
did?
get posted on Real Clear, and you're like, it's a week and a half ago, and
Right.
apparently they just gave it to Real Clear.
Right. All right. The last state that we have is Wisconsin. You guys have this Trump at 47.1 to Harris 46. The Senate race, Baldwin is up 48.3 to Eric Hovde. I think he's at 46. You guys, this tracks a lot of the public stuff. Wisconsin, I keep getting told over and over again, is very difficult to poll because they lack a lot of the voter history, the age, etc. Where do you, how is that as difficult as people make it out to, and where do you see the race shaping up from here?
It is because in the last couple of elections, you have unprecedented turnout in a few particular areas that is just really so high that it's almost questionable, and you that's hard to anticipate. Some of
Is
those
it? Do you mean like areas like Madison and Milwaukee, which are Dem strongholds?
more of a Madison than Milwaukee. Just
Oh,
that,
bunch of young voters.
well, and just the kind of thing that it just levels of turnout that just don't make sense with any model. So that's hard to model, and you have to be really careful. I mean, and hey, we did it better than anybody else did in 2020. We were the closest one in the country. Whereas, you had ABC, Washington Post saying Biden was going to win by 12. I mean, people get this one wrong a lot, and it's just very difficult. But I think they're both very close. And I think in the end, you look at the amount of undecideds, I think it may very well be that Hovde ticks up a little bit above Trump in the final analysis, but there's a good chance they both get over the line.
I think that's going to be interesting to me because I think looking at Ron Johnson's past, I agree with you. There's an undercurrent. How do you think, like, when you think about 2020, people got mailed ballots, the extended deadlines. When you take away all the COVID benefits the Democrats had, does that benefit us because they can't pull this crap anymore that they did last time?
Well, in some ways, yes. But in some ways, the Democrats have a well-oiled machine. And one of the things that I talk about a lot, and maybe I've made a lot of people upset, but Democrats spend their money very wisely and very hierarchically, and the Republicans are out there with 1,000 fiefdoms and 1,000 people whispering in billionaires' ears saying, "I've got the real answer." And a lot of guys are just getting rich, and they're not doing what they promised they would do. And you so often you see just the Trump campaign and a couple of his PACs that are very closely aligned with him doing great work. And then you just like, where is everybody else? I mean, here's the thing. I live in upstate South Carolina, and I get Asheville Market TV. I live in Georgia, and I know what's on these TV in these battleground states. You can't fool me. I see it. And I see how much the Trump campaign and the Republicans are getting trounced compared to what the Democrats are spending. And I don't believe for one second the Republicans have that less money in the outside groups. But I do believe there's going to be a lot of people with a new yacht, a new house, and maybe another Ferrari.
I, the scary part is you are so right, and this is I've been preaching about this for a while. These
And you
guys,
know it too.
no, you're right though. They go into tell these billionaires, I can do this better. I'll put your name on this ad. I'll run 1,000 points. But the ground game concerns that people have are real, and it's funny because Elon Musk came in the other day and had to rescue one. And I think it was in Wisconsin, and basically said, "We'll take over from here. Thanks for playing," because people have spread a lot of fairy dust around, and said, "I can do all this, and I just need to get these billionaires to fund it." And you're right. The Democrats don't care. They're like, "Tell me, I'll give you a check. Tell me that it's going to get this guy elected. Go spend it."
And
We
they
go
do it,
around.
and they
Yeah,
spend it wisely. And the thing is, you can't beat bodies. And when the Democrats, they put hundreds of people on the ground. And so I know the Republicans are working hard, but when they say 30, 40 people, and you're looking at 500 on the other side, you're like, that's not even the same game. That is
no.
not even the same game. It is people driven, but there's not profit in grassroots and ground. And that's why we don't have a lot of it going on.
All right, I got one state and one issue I want to cover with you. I live in Virginia. It's just outside, according to Real Clear Politics,
Not buying
Oklahoma.
it.
All
Not
right,
buying it.
all right. I thought you'd say that. I just hoped you'd give me a little
I,
bit of
I'll,
hope.
I'll, I'll say this for the record. Write it down. There's a better chance that Trump wins New York. than Virginia.
Oh, come on, Robert. I
There's
tell people
no
all the
way the
time.
swamp. There's no way the swamp will ever vote for him.
I know.
I don't
Well,
buy it.
listen. I was the last elector from Virginia in 2004 that voted Republican, and I hope to give up that title. I guess I get to keep it for another cycle. Let me ask you this.
I
This is
wish it was
my
true. I mean, if he wins Virginia, it is going to be a
oh
really early night.
oh yeah. If he wins Virginia, polls close at 7. We should know around 9. Start drinking. Start. I mean, I would
It's
just start.
amazing how Virginia, such a big state, can count so quick. Texas,
Well, you
such
know
a
what? We
big
got
state,
smart.
can count so quick. North
We got
Carolina, Florida can count so quick. And yet they can't do it in Pennsylvania and Arizona.
Well,
Wow.
it's just because when you go a little north, the air changes, and you know how it is. You can't count for that long. All right, here's my last issue question. That I have become convinced. Governor Glenn Youngkin made getting rid of cell phones in school a big issue. I think this resonates with parents. Huge. It's not a partisan issue. I also have been on a tear about big food, something that RFK and Tulsi and Alec Clark and others have talked about. I think both of those are sleeper issues that could resonate with constituencies that aren't being tapped right now. Do you think either one of those is this a pipe dream of mine, or is it just not ripe yet, or do you agree that these two could resonate with voters?
It is getting right. The problem right now is a lot of the suburban women that it will work with just personally will never vote for Trump. You can't convince them to, but that's just a Trump thing. And so it is an issue that will continue to benefit Republicans to be on this side. And it is something in the long term that is a great thing. And what Youngkin is, I mean, everybody, I hear it all the time from parents who are talking about their kids and and all that ding, ding, ding when they're sitting in class and it drives everybody crazy. I don't like hearing phones dinging in the background either. So, and you got to have, half the kids are taking ADD medicine. Well, I mean, why wouldn't you? Ding, I mean, how can you concentrate in that environment? So I actually understand why you'd want to get rid of all that and how parents could think that's useful. So I think these are up and coming issues. Totally agree with you. I just don't think they're ripe this time. But watch them in 2026 and beyond.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.